they used to print out 66 words a minute. So in a newsroom, you might have, depending how big or how much money your newspaper had, you might have 3 to 25 of these machines, and each one would give you a sports wire, the business wire, the Canada wire, the world wire, the South American wire, whatever you needed, you could get from the AP. Now, you're all familiar with wire services? AP, you've seen that, Associated Press, Reuters, Canadian Press, wire service.
Peter, can you play that again? Because I'm going to just play that, if you mind the video. Just, if you have it,
yeah.
So we can see it. So right now, if you need a story, you can Google it, or wire services are now digital. But when I started working at CBC, this is going to play. It's quite loud, right? And there would be the Associated Press, you have the Canadian Press, but it's like a typewriter and it's typing up the story. And if there was an update, you would have people standing by the wire machine watching the update come in. And where I worked at CBC at their national newsroom, they had a big closet to put it in so that it was quieter, like it had like sliding doors. But they would just print all day, and there'd be the paper would just print out. And there was something called rip and read. This is a term you might hear. And so the way things are printed in a wire, if it was a breaking story, they would rip it off the wire, right? You just tear it off, and then they would hand it to the anchors, who would then just read what the wire copy said, right? But this is how news used to be, and they would someone would have to go through. They'd have a person that would take all the paper and cut them up and say, these are the stories on whatever it would be, and they would break it all up. But that's how it used to be. And you'd have to wait one line at a time for the thing to print out.
So, and I worked for the Canadian Press office in Ottawa, Parliamentary Bureau. And our office was about a block from Parliament Hill. We had a special room for all these machines. And the copy boy would run for coffee when needed and take care of these machines. Rip the copy off, and the stories would come in takes, as they're called. It would be about this much text, and then it'd be a break, and then the next paragraphs or whatever, next page. And so we'd cut them up and then deliver them to various editors and reporters. Same thing at a newspaper. You would have a copy boy who had a room, and it was usually insulated too, with special insulation so that it wouldn't be so noisy. If you have 20 of these things, you could have 20 of them running. Anyway, that's how I started. I became friends with a photographer at CP. I'm 17, he was about 23 years old. And he had a sports car, 2 Nikons, and all kinds of girls hanging around all the time. So I thought it was kind of cool. How do you develop pictures? So he showed me how to make prints in the darkroom. You've seen that in movies, trays, liquids. So I learned how to make prints for him. And then one day he said, why don't you buy your own camera? And he pulled out a top Japanese camera. He sold it to me for 45 bucks. And I'd only been there for about 3 months by then. And so I thought it was kind of cool. I walked around with his camera. 45 bucks back then was a week's pay for me. Take-home pay was $43 a week. And so when I got home and told my dad about this, how much you pay for that? I told him, are you stupid? Good thing I didn't listen to my dad, because I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Anyway, so within about a year and a half of me walking around with this camera, I was always taking pictures of things on the hill. And of course, by being there, I would see things. And the thing is, with news photography, the more you shoot, the better you shoot. So I used to take a lot of pictures. And then if I had a good one, I'd offer it up, and they'd run it on the wire next day from the newspaper. A year and a half later, they gave me a full-time job as a photographer covering Parliament Hill. The rest is history. So I'm going to cut that out. I see the Associated Press has a newsletter every day for retirees, and in that newsletter, those who are nostalgic can play this in the background while they're reading this newsletter. So let me get out of this. Okay. So, just another bit of preamble about who I am. I'm still Peter Bregg. I worked for CP in Ottawa, covering the Hill. And a fellow by the name of Pierre Trudeau, you've heard of him? You've heard of Justin Trudeau? His father was Prime Minister back in the late 60s, up to about, I think, 1980, 82, whatever. And so I covered Parliament Hill a lot during those years. And I had a break. I went to the AP. I left Canadian Press in Ottawa, moved to Boston to work for the Associated Press, which is an international organization. It's owned by American newspapers, but they cover the world. Canadian Press only covers Canada unless there's Canadian news. For instance, if Canadian soldiers go to Afghanistan, Canadian Press would have a reporter or a photographer there, or a reporter. Nowadays, it's a reporter who also takes pictures. You haven't had Colin Kirkland.
Colin's coming in, we think, next week.
Okay, well, Colin, you're going to see. Now, that guy was a Canadian Press reporter, but he also did photography. He also had a tape recorder. He interviewed people, and because Canadian Press also has a radio service. They supply printed news for newspapers. They supply audio for radio and television, and they also offer up video. So he would do video interviews, and they pump that into the Canadian Press servers. And so television stations and newspapers, radio stations who have websites, they all want video because they sell ads. More ads, the more stuff they have to put on their internets, the more ads they can sell. So they want to buy the video. So Canadian Press reporter, Colin Kirkland, who is now retired, I think, from CP, but he was doing print, he was doing radio, he was doing a tape recorder, he was shooting video, he was shooting still pictures, and he did social media. He used to feed the Twitter and whatever else they needed. So, five-way person. In my day, we had two-way persons. We didn't call them persons, we called them men. Two-way men. The reporter who also took pictures. But now it's a different world. So, enough about that. Let's, one of the jobs that I enjoyed was portraits. I mean, I covered the end of the war in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, 8 Olympics, a lot of stuff. But the portraits are always the most fun because it was relaxed and you could meet new people. Now, this is in Rwanda. I was doing a package of photos of HIV/AIDS in Africa. And in Rwanda, I was at a clinic where they were treating people, but also making sure they had these special pills. And the thing about having these pills is you had to eat well, eat properly. So World Vision was also making food available to the people who were HIV positive. So these people were getting medication, they were getting fed, and the survival rate is so high now compared to what it was 25, 30 years ago. Now, why is this picture here? Because I like it. This is a very simple picture. You know, the word photography, photo, means light, and using light. The light for this picture, this young woman, she's 14, she's sitting next to a window. So imagine sitting next to that window where you ladies are, and we open up the curtain. In here right now it's not that dark, bright, it's pitch dark. But there's a bright light outside. It was daylight. So the light outside was shining through onto her face. And if I had taken a picture on automatic exposure, you know, most of you probably set your camera on automatic, and it does it all for you. Like you're using a cell phone, for instance, it's automatic. It decides what the exposure is required. But you can override that by going manual with your camera, and that's what I did here. The exposure on her face here was about 250 at 5.6. So let's say you're sitting at that window there. I'm going too long on this, I'm sorry, but if you're sitting at that window there, and there's light coming through, now she's got the back to the window, so I would have her turn so that she's facing one direction, and there's light coming in on her face. By shooting at 250 at 5.6, the room light is quite dim compared to that. But obviously we can see each other quite well, and we can take pictures in here without worrying about the daylight outside. But what I did is I exposed for the daylight so that it would light her face, and the rest of the room goes dim. And you get a much more dramatic portrait. that's a long story to,
But Peter, it's relevant because we're doing portraits, and so he's talking about the shutter speed and the aperture and how he uses both of those to change the look. Was that room quite bright then, Peter, is what you're saying?
yeah, imagine if you're in a classroom, one of the classrooms here that has windows.
Yep.
In the middle of the day,
Yeah, it's,
bright.
yeah.
You know, it's 60 at 4 for 400 ISO. So in here right now, it's 15 to 2.8 for 400 ISO. How do I know that? Shoot a lot and you get better. I took a lot of pictures over the years and now I know what the exposure is. Anyway, let's go on. Post portrait should reveal why this person is newsworthy. This guy here is a Canadian songwriter and singer. He was very famous back in the 70s, 60s, 70s. He's written songs. You can see all the gold platters he's got there. He's written more songs that got gold records because he wrote them, not because he sang them. You've heard of Frank Sinatra? He used an old papers one time. And he sang a song that you hear every once in a while. I Did It My Way.
Yeah.
This guy wrote the song. And anyway, so I sat him down to take some pictures, and it was nice, you know. Why did I photograph him? Because he's got all these gold records. That was at his Los Angeles home. Then we went to his den. He wanted something more casual for himself. And so we got to his den, and well, he still had some trophies on the table there, so that made it fine, and we got him relaxing. Now notice the light is from the ceiling. If he had been sitting upright and just looking at me, it would have been very dark. I would have had to use flash, I would have had to overexpose the picture, and I would have lost all the mood in the room. Now this is a natural photo, this is not a post-portrait. This guy's a fencer, he's just finished his match. This was in Cuba, back at the World Championships. And it's just the way he was holding his saber, what's he got?
A foil? Is that what it's called?
No, that's the, there's foil, saber, and I have to apologize because of my age, I'm forgetting words.
Are you kidding? Who knows about fencing? Anybody a fencer here?
There. What, there's foil?
No, I have no idea.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
green-
Foil
Yeah.
is the one you see mostly in television.
That's the
movies.
springy one, right?
Yeah, well, the difference is this piece here, also what is the target. With foil, only the upper part is a target, whereas with the the other one, the third, is the whole body pretty much is a target. And then the saber is one where it's it has a, like a pirate's sword, you know, there's a cup that comes around this way.
Yeah.
And with that thing, they slash at each other. They'll stand back and they blow the whistle, and all of a sudden they'll jump and smash somebody with it. And it's a very violent sport, that particular one. Anyway,
Now, if you are shooting sports, sorry, Peter, if you are shooting fencing, you need to be aware of what things are, how the rules are, because if you're doing a caption, you don't want to use the wrong thing. He's holding a foil or whatever, but it's not, because people do know. So Peter,
yeah.
that's why you did it, because you're shooting stuff like this.
When I worked in Boston, there was one fellow, I used to cover, with AP, you cover everything, sports, portraiture, news, conferences, whatever. But the Boston Globe had one photographer who did nothing but baseball. And his name was Danny DeStiger. He was a senior guy. I was 25 then, and he was about 60. And he just sat there quietly with his one lens, 300, and he just watched the game. And all of a sudden, the camera would go up, click, click, and he had the picture. He knew all the players. He knew who steals, and if they steal, do they mostly do it from first to second or second to third? He knew all of that. And so whenever somebody was on first and whatever was on third, he knew what the next play might be, and he was ready for it. So knowing your sport, if you're an athlete, if you're covering sports, is very, very important. Just knowing the news, read the newspapers. For instance, if you're covering City Hall, today the mayor has an argument with one of the council members, and you know, pointing fists at each other, whatever. And the next day, you happen to be walking around the hall, and there they are in the corner having a chat, and they're both smiling. That's news. Being aware. Normally, you might just ignore it, but hey, wait a second. Yesterday, they were mad at each other. This is a nice picture. Click. Front page of the Drum Star.
EP? Is that the name of the sword? EP? I looked it up. EPE.
Oh, epee. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, there you go.
Okay, now you got it.
Epee.
Foil, epee, saber.
But it's spelled EPE.
EPEE.
That's right.
It's a French word.
Yeah, oh, there you go.
un mot en français. Il y a du monde ici qui parle français? No, nobody speaks French. Habla español. No habla español.
I got hola, that's it.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Pardon?
I got hola, I can say hi.
Oh, hola.
That's it.
Hola. Muy bien. Okay. I have learned 12 words in about 15 languages. So.
But you do speak French fluent.
Well, I spoke French before I spoke English. I was born on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River. My mother was Francophone, spoke no English when she married my dad, and so we spoke French at home until I was about 6 years old, and they sent me to English school, so I had to learn English, which is a good thing because I'm not smart enough to learn a second language in my adult life, but as a kid, it's much easier. All right, this is a Canadian actress from Newfoundland, Mary. This is the part I should have done last night. Should have gone through my pictures to remember who's who. Mary is a famous comedian. This hour is 22 minutes on CBC. Anyway, you're going to hear a lot of stuff that you've never heard before. Has anybody ever heard of World War II? Yeah, good. Anybody ever heard of the Iron Curtain? No, okay, we'll talk about that later.
Mary Walsh.
Mary Walsh.
I got your back, Peter.
We're in Newfoundland, and it rains in Newfoundland. So I took her outside and went up to a hill where we can see a lot of fog. It just puts her in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Oh, I gave it away. Here's a famous Canadian film director, and
Norman Jewison, I think.
Norman Jewison.
Yeah.
He did that famous movie with Cher.
Not Moonstruck?
Moonstruck.
Yeah.
Anybody ever seen that movie, Moonstruck? These movies are from the 70s and 80s.
Classics. They're classics, Peter.
They're classics, yes. If you looked up Norman Jewison, you'd be going through the list of movies and you'd say to yourself, oh yeah, I saw that one, or I've heard about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this portrait here was done from Hello Magazine. And at the Film Center, they have a small theater there for reviewing movies. It has about 6 rows. Anyway, make use of color. That was the idea I was putting forward on this picture in this show, is that if you've got color, you make use of it. As a black and white, it wouldn't be so interesting. It'd still be interesting for the graphics. You know what I mean by graphics? Lines, that sometimes helps a picture. But anyway, in this case, it was the color. And this year, in July, it became a stamp.
Did they pay you for that, Peter? That's
Yep.
your picture? And you got paid by this Canada Post?
Yes, I did.
Do you have that at home, that post?
Oh, yes.
Nice.
I bought 100 of them.
Oh, they're great.
For Christmas, yeah. So when I send out my Christmas cards, I'll have to put a little note, photo postage stamp by Peter Bregg.
That's so great, Peter.
Yeah. So I had another stamp about 15 years ago, but it was just a picture of the National War Memorial in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And they ran that on the Remembrance Day memorial stamp, but it's just a picture of the statue. So this one here is a lot more. Would you mind closing that door? Thank you.
That's a great picture, Peter.
Now this lady here, Misha Rugerkowski, she's an officer. So I took her down to the Elgin Theater because of the ornate walls, balconies, whatever. And now, to make the picture look as nice as this does, you need to put lights. So I brought extra lights along. And you can buy or rent strobes from Vistec. And you're familiar with Vistec, the camera store? You can go in there and rent a simple light kit or a very elaborate light kit. And so what I did here is I had one light pointed at her, and then actually over on this side here, I had one light pointed at the wall. Because if I had taken a picture with available light, it would have been ugly,
Yeah.
already was. If I had used just the flash that's on the camera, she would have been lit, but the background would have been black. So I needed 2 lights. And know the subject. Well, we know who this guy is. I sometimes will take pictures of people the way I think I'd like to see them. And then I say, by the way, do you have any ideas you'd like to try? And this is one he wanted. He said, I like my picture taken this way. I don't know why. Maybe he feels like he's in control here. But this was before he became an MP, I think. And this is a famous actress. Famous actress. You know her. Tell me her name. Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I should have done the research last night.
You're doing just fine,
I
Peter.
haven't shown these pictures in ages, years. Anyway, this is over at actually the hotel is gone now, the Four Seasons. And on the mezzanine floor, there's like a reception area with couch, chairs, and then you can sit there and meet people, whatever. And then anyway, so I got up there and I pointed to the sofa. You want to go sit over there? Meaning, to me, I was thinking, go over there on the sofa. So she goes over and she sits on the floor. This is gift. Thank you. This is an unusual picture. How often are you going to get a famous actress to sit on the floor for you? Well, sometimes you can't, depending on the relationship you develop. But anyway, she just did it on her own, which was very nice. This guy here, we won't talk about too much, but body language, let people be natural. So I had him standing on the sidewalk, so he leaned over on the post, and I positioned myself. Now this picture is taken, it's obviously winter, and so 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a cloudy day, it looks pretty dark. And so I positioned myself so that I would get those lights in the background. Adding light and color to the background enhances your photograph. This is a famous actress. She was in most recent movie. Anyway, she's famous. Simple, straight-on shots. So sit down. Thank you very much. Click, click, click. And then sometimes what happens? People start to get a little. No, I want to do this. I want to do that. They think they know what you want, but they also have an idea of how they want to look. So let it happen. Now, this lady here, she's from a famous family, but it's not that important. This particular story that week was, I think she had written a letter to the editor and they wanted a picture of her. So I go to it was a hotel lobby waiting area. And so what I did is, I could have just photographed her, as you saw the previous portrait, someone sitting there in a chair, nothing. So what I did is I moved the flower pot over here, and so it frames. Whenever you can frame a picture, it adds an element to your photograph. It just makes it a little more interesting. And the cup, just so you've got that circle going around. Now this is our former Governor General, Payette. Anybody remember that one? She was very much unliked by everybody. I was surprised, the way she developed as Governor General. As an astronaut, she was great. And so I like to take pictures. Again, I like the light. Use the light. Somebody walked out. This time of day, this is in Houston at the Space Center. So I called from Toronto. I said, "Sweet girl, what time does the sun set?" Like today, you just look it up online and find out what time the sun set. She said, "Oh, probably about 5 o'clock." Okay, so it was winter time. So I said, "Let's meet at 4 o'clock." I like that light in the background. I wish I could show you my wife's picture. I know you can't see it from over there, but you see that light in the sky?
That glow in the sky
Yeah.
there.
If you've got that, after the sunset, the sky goes blue. And if you just expose a certain way, you can have that rich blue sky in the background and maybe some saffron from the sunset. Anyway, there were these jets there. Now, I have pictures of her standing like this, but I wanted to have the jet bigger than full length. If she's full length, everything else becomes smaller in the background. By having her on her knee, then I can come up closer, and that makes the jet in the background bigger as well. Now, some of you may have zoom lenses that are, let's say, 24 to 75 range. And if you're taking wide-angle pictures all the time, everything that's in the foreground is big, but everything that's in the background is tiny. Not small, tiny. And so by using the longer lens and backing up, you shoot, and what that does, it does two things. One, it makes the background bigger, and it brings it closer. So often I see people with their cell phones. These are great things, by the way. I just went on a cruise in, about a month and a half ago. And 90% of my, I have a Leica, but 90% of my pictures were taken with a cell phone. And I see people taking pictures of their friends full length, and they go right up close, and they shoot them wide angle. And then if you back up some more, and then zoom in, you'll see how different your picture looks. Now, when you leave here today, if you can remember, go out there and photograph somebody, it's a great light out, go out and photograph someone, full frame, with a wide angle, and then back up as far as you can, and zoom in as much as you can, so they show up the same format as the wide angle picture. You've got the feet and the head. And you will be surprised at how different your picture looks and how much better it looks. So what I did here is I got down on my stomach and I had a light, a flash, strobe. And it's a battery powered thing, so it put it on a tripod, stand it up, leave it there, and you walk around and take all your pictures. And so that's how I made that picture.
Peter, can you go back to that one?
Yes.
Was that a photograph or was that digital?
I shot that with film.
That negative's flipped.
Transparency.
It's backwards. If you look at the logo on her shirt, NASA, it's backwards. You see it on the right
I
pocket.
believe you, but I'm trying to figure out why.
It's hard to tell because it's just that NASA thing.
Yeah, but I remember the plane being where it is.
Unless for some
And
reason.
even if I flopped the transparency, the plane then would be on this side.
It would be. Interesting that way.
Where do you see this NASA that's
Right here. NASA. NASA should be this.
well, you know what?
We'll have to look at
Look at that up later because,
So there you go. You really can't see it, but
yeah.
my incredible eye for detail.
Yeah,
noticed it.
okay.
But anyways, it doesn't.
Showing up for Gary.
It's still.
Showed me up.
No, I didn't show you up. No, I didn't show you up. It's a great
Yeah.
picture.
That's
It's
all
a
right.
great picture.
What did your mother say about you?
My mother said, always be nice to Peter Bregg.
Okay. So, this guy look familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was doing, I'm taking too much time here.
You're doing great,
good-
Peter. This is
you're
interesting.
good till 1 o'clock, right?
You have till 4 o'clock. You can stay as long as you want. No, we have till 1.
Great,
Yeah.
'cause I can talk that long. Anyway,
This is before he was president.
that's right.
Yeah.
I was doing, McLean's was doing a story on New York City. The cleanup of New York. They revitalized Times Square and other things. And they gave me a shopping list, photograph subways, photograph buses, Wall Street. They wanted me to photograph Harlem. You familiar with Harlem in New York City?
No.
It's not a place where a little white guy like me, would walk around with 3 Nikons.
It's very
It
different now,
wouldn't be
Peter.
very smart
It-
if you're asking for trouble. What I did is I got onto one of those double-decker buses. You can shoot from the top. Perfect. And the thing is, now I'm a visiting tourist. And the people on the ground were smiling and waving.
That's
It
great.
was great. So I had some great pictures out of Harlem. Not because I was smart, only because I got lucky and got on a bus instead of walking around. Anyway, they wanted me to get a picture of the Donald. He was famous to some degree. He was making it all up and feeding the newspapers with it. But so I called up his office, speak to the assistant. She said, "Oh no, he's too busy, too busy." I said, "Look, all I need is a quick picture of him. I can take a picture of him getting in and out of the car when he comes in for work." And she said, "What's this for?" I said, "Well, it's for the cover of McLean's magazine." I said, it's like Time and Newsweek, but only in Canada." She says, "Are you putting him on the cover?" And I jokingly said, "Well, if I could get him in the middle of Times Square, yeah." And she said, "You would?" I said, "Oh, let me call you right back." So I called up the editor, because at that time, the picture they were going to run on the cover, New York City, they wanted me to photograph a couple of tourists looking at their map and pointing at skyscrapers. Anyway, so I said to the editor, "If I get Donald in the middle of Times Square, can we put that on the top?" He says, "Yeah, sure." So I phoned him back, "Yes." She says, "Well, the only time he's available is at 7:30 in the morning." No problem. I had lived in New York in the in the 80s. So this was in 95. So I lived in New York, so I'm familiar with Times Square. And I said, "Have him meet me at the George M. Cohan statue." Now, if anybody has been to Times Square and you know about the half-price ticket center, back then it was just a booth, but now it's a building. It's just amazing. But anyway, people line up there to buy tickets for half price for today's show. And any show, any Broadway shows that have extra tickets, they send them there and they sell them at half price. Anyway, so people are lined up already. I'm waiting at 7:30. I have my trusty strobe light, and I put it down, and you can see the bit of a shadow here. So you know that the light is brighter than the ambient light. I just set it up and I wait. He shows up, and actually his bodyguard shows up. Mr. Bregg, hey, I'm here. So I said, just have him stand right here. So Donald comes over, he stands there, and he's like this, and I'm taking pictures, and I get about 4 or 5 frames. I'm shooting film. And back in those days, when we were shooting for a cover, you would shoot 2 or 3 rolls of film, 30, 50, 60 pictures. I'm about 5 frames in, and he's just standing there. And I said, sir, can I have some animation? And he said, well, what do you want? Bingo. And he was gone. And I think I had about a total of 8 frames, but we only needed 1. And the editor used to run, or they still do, a little blurb on the editor's page. Usually a note about today's cover story or something else that happened in an editorial. And that week he did his little blurb on our cover shot, on how Donald arrived and left so quick. It was a drive-by shooting in New York. Well, enough about me. Now, Jason Priestley, is that
Yes.
something familiar?
Yep. Canadian actor.
People his age, no. Canadian actor.
90210.
Yeah. That's all right. Sometimes let the subject do the talking and let someone else in the room talk. So his buddies, he was sitting there smiling a little bit, but his buddies were making fun of him. And so he breaks out into a laughter. I made a better picture. And I didn't have to do anything other than point the camera. This lady here, color. There's a famous Canadian artist. His name is Charles Pachter. He has a studio, residence studio, down near the Vaughan. Anyway, so I was using his studio as a location for a shoot for Hello Magazine. This woman here was a city TV personality, and they were doing a fashion. Hello was doing a fashion shoot, so I just had to photograph her in different locations. And they put on this white dress, and so I remembered the white wall painting. It's a very famous painting by Charles Pachter. And they had these red chairs, and she's tall and vertical. And so I just lined them up, and even the way the flag is shaped here, she fits right in. And it's not like I plan every minute detail. It's just that sometimes you let it happen, but you recognize this looks good. This took some effort, but it was easy to do. One thing, when I worked on Parliament Hill, I walked around the center block and the east block, the west block, so often. I remembered all the locations. If I had to photograph somebody in a real hurry, because sometimes that's how it would happen. You're walking down the hall, there's a politician that we need a picture of today. Sir, I need you, over here, quick. He hasn't got time, but stand here, because I remembered that the Gothic window behind this stairway works perfect. Stand here, click. Thank you very much, goodbye. It's over. So remembering locations. When I walk around town here, I know where I could find a situation for any picture that I need to take. That's being a little bold, brave here, but no, really, you can, if you remember. Sometimes you don't remember. I don't remember everything today, but someday I'll be talking to someone about wanting to photograph someone in a certain way, and I'll say, oh yeah, that light that comes off the window at the H&M store at nighttime, it's really bright. I can make a cool silhouette against that window, or I could use that soft light that comes off of that and photograph the movie house, the building where the Dundas movies are shown. You're familiar with Dundas Square. So I know that, I remember that. I had been down to the fireman's training, this is a long story just to tell you that's the fireman's training school. And they have an old car sitting there that's they've stripped anyway. There are no seats in it, nothing. It's just the metal frame. And they have gas, propane gas being pumped into it. So then they set a torch to it, And then the firemen come in and they put it out. That's their training for that particular lesson. I remembered that was happening there. Fast forward a year or two, and I'm photographing this lady who is a TV star in a program. Obviously it's about firemen, I can't remember what it was called now. Anyway, it's about firemen, and she was the wife of one of the firemen. And it was a fashion shoot. I had to photograph her in half a dozen situations at the fire hall. But this picture, what I did is I arranged first of all with the fire department, can I use this area as a set? Sure, but you'll have to pay for the gas. Okay, $400 worth of propane used up on this shoot. And then what I did is I got my strobe light and I set it up and I balanced my light. Now, if you're photographing flames, you know yourself, you're taking pictures in your living room, maybe it's a fireplace, and the fireplace, the flames wash out. In other words, they go white almost, or yellow, light yellow, no detail. But if you underexpose the flames, then you get detail like that. Because I'm using flash, the flash, I don't know if you're aware, but flash fires at a 500th of a second. In other words, if I turned off all the lights in here and took a picture with the flash, at 1 second, there wouldn't be any movement because the flash fires at a 500th of a second. The light is only on for 1/500th of a second. So, if you're taking pictures in this room here, at a half a second or a quarter of a second, with flash, chances are you won't, even though some light in here, you won't get much movement, if any at all. So, why am I telling you that? Because by setting the camera aperture low enough, I could make this, the flames darker. So I get detail and I get all that rich orange. And then the light is close enough to her, she's perfectly exposed. So, and
you know,
and
by the way, Peter, you were talking about the exposure, but it was Peter that told me years ago that if you can pick between overexposed and underexposed, always pick underexposed, right? There's more detail in the shot.
And so, that's how I made this picture. Now, if I had taken this conventionally, stand here, click, let's go. Because it's still daylight, you know, it's about 4 in the afternoon. There's enough daylight to make it with available light, but by underexposing, I get the flash, flash, she's lit, and then the flames are perfect. So next time you're by the fireplace, take some pictures on automatic and without flash, and then take your flash, put it on, step away from the fireplace, and shoot at 150th or 250th of a second, because your flash will light the subject. Now, does everybody understand how aperture works with flash? And some do, some don't. If the flash fires at a 500th of a second, it doesn't matter what your shutter speed is, as long as you're not overexposing the ambient light. So if I'm taking a picture here at 60th of a second, it'll be pretty dark, except over there. If I put a flash on the camera and I take a picture of somebody standing here, the flash will light that subject, and the background will only be lit by the ambient light as long as I use a shutter speed and aperture that isn't going to underexpose the background. With the flash, only the aperture is important to the exposure, because when you have a flashlight, if I come really close to you, it's bright. If I back up, it gets dimmer. So if I adjust the aperture with flash, I can adjust the flash. I did. With this picture, I set the flash at half power. Okay. Now I do a test shot. With a digital camera, you can do test shots. Okay. It works fine at 60th of a second, but at 4, it was overexposed, so I put it at 5/6. 60th of a second stayed put. But the aperture is what it controls the exposure for flash, because the flash has one shutter speed, 500th of a second. I know I'd have to come back and talk some more. Actually, we'll come back here if you like, and we'll do some demonstrations. This person here is famous, although she doesn't look like this anymore. From Puerto Rico.
Is that Jennifer Lopez?
Jennifer Lopez, thank you.
She was in the news with Ben Affleck, wasn't she?
Yeah. So, anyway.
And by the way, she looks similar.
Yeah, she still looks,
I think she still looks like that, yeah.
Every once in a while, but.
Now, is this, where is this, TIFF?
This is during TIFF.
Yeah.
The thing is, I show pictures that people have photographed, and they say, wow, you're really good. No, I worked for Hello and McLean's magazine. They had the appointment to interview and photograph Jennifer Lopez and whoever else. I was only the guy with the camera.
Yeah.
On standby. So it wasn't me, it was the subject. Now this one here I like. This lady here is, she might even be dead by now, but she was a jazz singer. And I was photographing her in New York in her apartment. Very nice, well, I guess you might call it Victorian living room, furniture, and walls, everything else was really cool. And then I went into her music room, and she's got a piano. And I was setting up my lights, and she sat there, and the afternoon sun was just shining through the window. And I said, okay, hold it there. And I made that picture for myself, because I liked it. And McLean's didn't use it, but about a year later, some magazine that comes out of Montreal, a photo magazine, and they were doing a little brief story of me, and they wanted a bunch of pictures. So I sent them a bunch of stuff, including this picture. And they ran that on the cover because it has a lot of big space here, so they could put their headline. And they didn't put, in the cover of a magazine, you'll find a headline for the main story, and then what they call cells. So it might be a story, the cover story is about Trump, but then they'll have cells, little blurb about, how Trudeau is making do, how Ford is screwing everybody with his $200, for election bribe. All that, those are cells, a little blurb they put on the page. This particular one, all they had was a headline. Peter Bregg. It says Peter Bregg. Oh gosh, I forget the word. Too bad, I can't remember the word right now.
But what is relevant though is they're going to use they liked that because it was all that negative space there.
That's right. And it's something to do with his lifetime work. The one word, and I apologize.
It's all right.
I've reached that stage in my life where words are disappearing from my vocabulary. It'll come back to me tonight. I'll wake up at midnight. But a friend of mine saw the cover and this one word, and she said, I almost cried because I thought you had died. And so they were doing a story about you.
Oh no.
Yeah. Ballerina, lighting again. What I did here is I just put a light back there to shine through, because she's already showing me how she dances and whatever, and practices. And then add one light on the front. She was becoming famous here, and about a month after I took did the shoot, she was hired by the London Ballet.
Yeah.
So the story never ran. I don't know why. You know this guy.
Howie Mandel?
Howie Mandel. He and I have similar hairdos. And here I just, again, it was backstage, nothing to photograph, no background, nothing worthwhile. And so I just used the light and in a contrasting way like this. Sophie Gregoire. This is in Africa, Ethiopia. And she was in a hut that had a skylight. And so I had her stand underneath, you see the light on the floor, the dirt floor. But anyway, I said, just stand up over there. And she did, and it just looked nice. David Foster, musician, songwriter. A lot of the shoots that we do for Hello, McLean's, and the newspapers too, whenever TIFF, or if someone's putting out a book, an author, they come to town, music, maybe somebody's releasing a new album, they come to town, the PR department calls up the media, and they give you an appointment. You can come between 2 and 2:15. You have 2 o'clock to set up and interview and shoot, and then out, someone else comes in right after you. if they're very famous and they have a lot of money, what they'll do is they'll have 2 or 3 rooms, hotel rooms. And the news people show up, you go to room 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the artist goes from room to room to room to room without having to waste any time. As they show up, you're all ready. And so sometimes it's pretty dry stuff. And it was nice enough, and I said, I just squat over against the door there, and I used the window light. I took a whole bunch of other pictures, but anyway, this is the one that I like best because it's different from the other pictures I shoot most of the time. And then close up, Margaret Atwood. Now her hair's gone gray. It's amazing. Overnight it just went gray. And this guy here is a famous author, but I apologize. His name escapes me right now. But anyway, a full-length picture. See, with her, close up, people know her. So it's nice to have something that people recognize. The hair, the soft light, the background, it works well as a close-up. This guy, on a scale of photogenic, he's not as high as some of the other people I've photographed. And so it was better for him, for me to photograph him full length. Plus, he has a really cool outfit on, that white leather jacket, the black, at the bar. It worked well. Now, avoid distractions, busy background. Depth of field control, light and color tones help separate the background. Now, Jennifer Garner, she's here for TIFF. This is taken at Ryerson here. You know, there's a theater.
The Ryerson Theater, which is now called the Chrysalis.
Okay, you familiar with that place? Right, well, from the sidewalk, there's a, I don't know what you call that, the open space that goes to the quad.
The portico or something.
Right, and so whenever they had movies there, they would set up the cameras, the photographers, and the crowds would be on the side, but photographers would be facing the street. And then they get out of their car and they come out and they stand there long enough for you to take their picture. Now, you're probably making these pictures with a telephoto lens. Does anybody not understand depth of field? Don't be shy. Okay, everybody knows what depth of field is. So you notice this picture has what's called shallow depth of field. The subject's in focus, but the background isn't. If you're using a long lens, you lose depth of field, which is fine for this kind of picture. And if you're shooting at a wide aperture, again, a wide aperture meaning, let's say, f4 instead of f16. f16 you get a lot of depth, f4 you get very little depth. So you shoot with a wide aperture, with a longer lens, and then the background goes out of focus. So for this picture, it worked out perfect. She's got a lovely smile. She just jumps at you in the picture. And then the background, there's people across the street, Girard Street. They're in the sunlight. And so it's just, it worked out well. Rihanna, this was, you know, those hotel room shots I tell you about. There's nothing in this room except the bed over there and a chair here and the curtains. And so I had her stand in front of the curtain, and then I used a soft flash on this side. Yes?
Do you ever get like starstruck with the people you're like taking pictures of, or like nervous?
Yeah.
Or,
you know,
'cause these are some major like names.
I apologize, and I don't want to be less than humble, but no. You know, I started taking pictures in 1966, 7, and I was hired in 1968, working Parliament Hill. And then 6 months later, a guy named Pierre Trudeau became Prime Minister. And so that's what I was doing all the time, photographing Pierre Trudeau. And when he traveled to China, to Europe, and whatever, and I all went along as well. And then when he met with foreign leaders, President Reagan and so on, I was there by virtue of being the CP photographer. So it's easy to become nonchalant about it all. I'm trying to think if at any time I might have been nervous. I suppose if I had to shoot the Queen by myself, I'd always photographed the Queen with everybody else, so it wasn't like she knew I was even there. But if I had to go into a room and say, Your Majesty, or Charles, by the way, I'm older than the King, you know, Charles, you see what he looks like? I feel pretty good. So, but yeah, if I had to go into a room to photograph just by myself, someone like the King or the Queen, I might be a little nervous because I'd be worried that the flash wouldn't fire, especially if something goes wrong. It does happen. And over the years, I've learned how to catch up. If something goes wrong, don't panic. You can fix it. Anyway, so, but Rihanna, she was, you know, all I had to worry with her was that her PR people didn't want me to photograph the front of her shirt. And I don't remember seeing any soup on it or anything. I think she just didn't like the look of it. And then I don't think she was pregnant. So I saw that look.
I was like, maybe
touching
she
her
was
stomach.
hiding
Yeah, no, I don't think she was. But anyway, it worked out really nice. She's got these great eyes. And so her face is a little underexposed, but that's okay because there's lots of exposure here. There's exposure on that side, and her eyes jump back. That's what makes that picture. And the window is sheer curtain. The light outside is 511. The light inside is 264, 65.6. So this is in Rwanda. 10 years after the genocide. You've all heard of the genocide in Rwanda? It's in all the papers. Yeah. Anyway, 10 years later, I went back with General Dallaire. Are you familiar with General Dallaire? Romeo Dallaire? He was the United Nations general in charge of the peacekeepers during the genocide. And they were helpless. They couldn't do anything because of the ridiculous rules that the UN has. UN soldiers in some missions are not allowed to shoot at anybody unless they're being fired upon. So this guy may be shooting this guy, but the mission we're on today is not to prevent them from shooting each other. Who knows? Anyway, so I went back with a documentary film crew. They were doing a film on Dallaire returning 10 years after the genocide. And so I went along, and so this picture here, these two girls are, I think she was 18 and she was about 14. So they were just babies, really children, small children, during the genocide, and both their parents disappeared. They were taken away and never came home. So the government has now put all those orphans, now it's been a long time, so it's been another 10 years, 94, 04, yeah, it's been 20 years now. So they're all grown up, but the thing is, back then, the government put them in homes, and if there was an one sibling old enough, 18 or over, they were put in charge of the home. So anyway, that's what I'm here. I'm photographing the one on the left, and the one on the right is going out to fetch water. That's one thing that happens a lot in Africa, is like the girls have to fetch water. There's a guy from City TV whose name escapes me right now, but he's a real showman, so I just had to point the camera and he behaved the way he does. And but it was kind of cool, the way the curtain. This is a story I did in Ethiopia. Doctors with an organization called Orbis. It's a volunteer organization. They have a 747 that they fly around the third world. They land, they spend a month there, and they bring in doctors from around the world to volunteer. And they have in the plane operating tables and so on, and at the front they have seating, so that like theater seating. And while the doctor is operating in the back here, it's being fed to the front of the plane, and they use these devices here to, because they're operating on somebody's eyeball. So as he's operating, he's talking and telling them what he's doing. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and the people in the front are able to watch a live operation and ask questions as well. And then when they leave, they're handed a DVD to take home with them, doctors and nurses. So that's what this mission was about. She was Canada's foremost fencer. She has an épée.
There it is.
And so did that other guy. It was an épée.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Shireen Shaw. But props. You saw the guy before. You know, an easel for an artist, tools for a carpenter or a mechanic, and this guy here is special tools that he uses to operate. That's her prop. Action, face. Now, again, I like to play with light whenever I can. I had one light flash on a stand, and then in the background here, I think this is a pub, a bar. Now the light in here is probably something like 15 to the second at 2.8. But I'm outside of the bar, and I have a flash that's lighting him up. And so, again, remember I told you the shutter speed is irrelevant to the flash, only the aperture. So if I stop down the aperture or open it up, whatever is required, to get the light back here and the shutter speed, then the flash will freeze the subject. Now, if I had taken this picture at a 15th of a second at 2.8, it wouldn't be as sharp. But the flash, again, it triggers at a 500th of a second. So when that little flash pops up on your camera, it's going to shoot at 500th of a second. Anyway, nice face. This guy's a Canadian singer.
Nice.
This guy's a businessman. So, the body language, this guy's a businessman. He's in charge of the company. He looks firm. But I like to make the pictures interesting whenever I can. And I use light and props. Props, in this case, the background. In this boardroom, this is a wide angle lens. So in this boardroom, in the ceiling, there are lights. Like, see these lights here? Those are tungsten. You're familiar with tungsten versus daylight? Yes, of course you are. Now this light in here isn't green, it's fluorescent. And in many cases, fluorescent lights on color film, daylight film, comes up green. So I set the camera for flash, for his face, and flash is like daylight, it's like sunlight. So the camera's taking this picture at daylight white balance. At daylight white balance, these lights come up orange. Fluorescent light comes up green. When I'm standing in the room to take this picture, I don't see all these colors, but I know the camera does, and from experience. Also nowadays, that was shot with film, but nowadays you have digital, so you can see it right away. This is a famous Canadian general, Lou Mackenzie, United Nations. The Yugoslav War, back in the 90s, Yugoslavia stood up, Serbia, Croatia. If you Google it, you'll know more about it than I can tell you. But Canadian general was in charge of the UN peacekeepers in Sarajevo, this guy here. And he was one of those guys who was a darling of the media, because he spoke in sound bites. The TV camera turns on, the microphone goes up, it comes up in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, exactly what they wanted to hear. He was just wonderful. Anyway, because of that, he became a hero in Canada in the newspapers. And so Maclean's wanted to do a story with him. So in Ottawa, again, remember as I mentioned, keeping track of locations where pictures might be handy to shoot, like a fire school. And now here, this is a UN Peacekeepers Memorial in Ottawa. I'm in Toronto, but I remember, I come from Ottawa, so I know where everything is in Ottawa. As I remembered this memorial. I wanted to shoot it at 4 o'clock, it's winter, actually it's November, late November. And I wanted to shoot it that time of day when the sky would be a dark blue, like this. And I brought a light, flash, to light him up. And I had two lights, one over here, and I had one over there, so that his face would be lit up. And I shot it so that I didn't worry about lighting on the subject, the statue, because they're silhouetted. And these bricks, this concrete stuff, again, because I'm using flash, off camera, I'm able to light him. I'm able to focus my light in one area of the picture and not the other. If I had taken this picture with the flash that pops up on your camera, it would have lit everything flat, including this. Now, funny thing is that after I did this picture, we put it on the cover of Maclean's, I had people asking me, when did you go to Sarajevo? They just didn't stop to look that the guys in the background are statues. They just assumed that all this brick is what you normally see in Beirut, Hamas, not Hamas, but the Gaza, so on. They thought it was in Sarajevo. So anyway, it's again, the point of this picture I'm showing to you now is keep track of locations so that when you need to do a certain photograph, you might just remember, oh, this would work here. This is that story with the eye doctors again. And these ladies here had trachoma. What happens, I don't know why it happens so much in Africa, but the eyelid gets turned in a bit and scratches the eyeball, and they go blind. And so what they were doing with these women is they were almost blind. They do a slit job, like plastic surgery. You know, when you have bags under your eyes and they cut away a piece of flesh and then they sew it up and now you look 10 years younger. Well, that's what they did with these ladies. They did a slit operation so they could lift up the eyelid, up the above eyelid, so it wasn't scratching the eyeball anymore. But they couldn't do two, so they just did one. One's enough to carry them until they die, I suppose. And then post-surgery, they're all sitting here, and it just made an interesting picture. And this is the last one. Small group, portraits, try for visual interest by keeping heads at different levels. You know, you can stand, these three people, by the way, are all quite tall. And so, this guy here is taller than his dad. That's Miller, Ian Miller, the famous Canadian Olympian horseback rider. Equestrian, thank you. Yeah, came up with the word. Thank you. Anyway, something that you might notice when you're watching television, movies, and there's a street scene at nighttime, got all the neon lights and everything else, and you notice that the pavement is nice and shiny, almost like it just rained. Often it might have rained. Most of the time it didn't rain. What they did is they went by with a hose, those trucks, street cleaners, and they just hosed down the street so that the fluorescent lights or these neon lights reflect in the roadway. It just makes it more lively, more colorful, more contrast. And so what I did here, this is the 30th floor in the, where they keep the horses.
The stable.
Thank you. Anyway, the stable, it is just an ugly floor. And so I had them hose down the floor so that when I took the picture, it would be a dark color and look more interesting.
That's a technique they use in movies. If you watch films and movies, look at the street, it's always dark because they've washed it down.
I think.
Yeah, they do that. They hose down the street to make it darker.
Okay.
Plus, you get a reflection too on that too, Peter.
Yeah, well, you can. There wasn't much on this one here.
But you can get.
There are times when you might get, depending how it's lit and exposed, you might get, see here, right here, you've got this guy's pants here.
Little reflection.
Okay, why don't we take a 10-minute break? It's 11:20, come back at 11:30.